And we are back with the pursuit of ownership. And I am super, super excited about this one. I think, every now and then, we've had a great string of interviews, but every now and then we have one that really punctuates what this show is about. And we hear a story from one of those unicorns out there that really just kind of redefines what's possible. And if this guy has a story anything like what I've been told already, I think this is going to be a pretty historic one that we get a lot of questions about. So I'd just like to welcome Parth Patel to the show. He's come on here to kind of share a bit about his journey and tell us a little bit about himself. So Parth, welcome.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Peyton. I mean, you've really set me up here, so hopefully I don't let a lot of people down. But right. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so just to give everyone a little bit of a backstory, so Brandon Johnson, he's a friend of the show. Texted me or messaged me rather on Facebook, which anyone's welcome to do, by the way. And he told me about a good friend of his that he went to school with and a few things about his story. And it just absolutely blew me away. Frankly, I kind of thought it was full of crap. But then I called up my buddy Peyton. I'm kidding, Parth. I called my buddy Peyton. I said, hey, look, we really got to get this guy on the show. I've never heard of anything like this. And so I am super, super psyched to talk to him in person and hear about his story. So Parth, without further ado, introduce yourself and kind of give us a little bit of a background.
I appreciate the introduction. I'm a dentist. So I went to Penn Dental, graduated in 2018, went on to Wharton, got my MBA and just graduated recently in 2020. So a little bit of an unorthodox post-dental school plan. But it's something that was really important to me. A big reason why I went to Penn was I was business focused, business minded, and it's something that I gained a lot of value in, which I'm sure we'll go into in a little bit. But I started my dental practice journey when I was a first year dental student. I've grown up in a healthcare focused family, so I was exposed to the business of healthcare, other aspects of healthcare besides patient care and clinical aspects. So that was definitely a lucky perspective I was able to bring into dental school. And first year, I knew during dental school that I wanted to go out, I wanted to start dental practices. And soon enough, summer of first year, we were on the hunt, a lot of backing from my dad, to be honest, my uncle, really helpful during the journey.
That's awesome.
So definitely privileged in that. And went out and found a practice to buy. And man, did I make a ton of mistakes, just mistake after mistake. And to a point where, the revenue of the business actually cut in half. And me and my clinical partner, fantastic guy, we're really in a sink or swim mode. And through that process, through that journey of really juggling dental school, turning around this practice, learned a lot, grew a lot. And from that point on, I've never really, hopefully I never really looked back where, started buying other practices. I started starting Denovos to a point now where I'm operating in multiple states. And I'm happy to dive into any of that, which I'm sure we'll get to. But yeah, that's really my start. So a little bit unorthodox. Dental school was a grind just because I was juggling multiple things. I was basically in virtual school for the first 2 years, to be honest. Teachers probably didn't like me very much.
Right. Yeah. I get that.
Yeah. So it was really the COVID norm, but 4 years early, maybe.
You just got a head start. You saw it
before it was cool.
Yeah.
Maybe it was cool. I'm not sure, but it's kind of what I had to do.
You did what was necessary, right?
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I just have to kind of stop you for a second. So that was a pretty action-packed minute and a half summary of pretty insane story, and I'm sure you're aware of that. So let's kind of backpedal a second. So you said that in the summer of D1, that's when you kind of started your practice search, and you said that you were kind of being helped along by your family and such. There was already kind of some experience in that. So were there dentists in your family already? Were you already kind of familiar with dental practice acquisitions, or how'd you go about that?
Absolutely. I've got a big family, and many of my family members are dentists. So I was familiar with that. Backtracking to undergrad, I have had experimented in entrepreneurship. I've always been interested in entrepreneurship.
Okay.
High school, senior year, started a video sharing app. College, I started a nonprofit. So the world of starting businesses, entrepreneurship was something that I'm really passionate about, and it's kind of been a lifelong journey. And so kind of combining that experience within the dental world is where I started in the summer of D1.
Wow, that's fantastic, man. That is just like, that really drives home the point of like not waiting until someone just gives you permission to do something. You starting businesses in high school and undergrad, and that leading into you purchasing a practice D1. I mean, you've just been going against the grain for a long time. A lot of people just sort of take that time to focus on their studies and life experiences and sorts of things, and just being 20, 22 years old, and and that's enough. But it wasn't enough for you. You had to have those sorts of pursuits. So I've got to applaud you on that. You have a kind of a long track list of entrepreneurial pursuits. I think that's really fantastic. So kind of walk me through how you waded into deciding to acquire a practice, and what that process was like for you. So were you sort of using a lot of the internal relationships that were already there with your family, or did you, study something in particular? What sort of resources did you have on hand to go about that?
Yeah. So I'm so excited to share this, because no one after listening to this podcast should do it worse than I did it. And you can probably learn, or you do learn, I should say, way more when you hear about people's failures than me just giving you some success story. So I'm really happy to dive into it.
Right.
Found a practice that was for sale, had a broker involved, typical stuff. Practice was a big practice, doing $2.5 million in revenue, 20 some operatories, big practice, juggernauting along. And certainly when that's your first acquisition, that'll come with a host of complex challenges and things that you probably don't really appreciate until you get in there. And so, ended up closing on the deal. We financed the sum of it. And again, that's where my uncle and my father stepped in. Without them, this would have been possible. And then the show started. So quickly learned, I can go through a host of the mistakes, that I made and that we made as operators or evaluators of a business. But the irony when I say all this is, in retrospect, I'm so happy it happened to me, because I learned so much, and it really kind of molded me to get to a point where I am now. But long story short, revenue cut in half. All right, why did that happen? We take over the first month, the second month, the AR is really dried up because we purchased the AR and it wasn't coming in like we thought it was going to come in. Revenue started month one, about a half, like 120K a month in collections, when we're expecting 240K. And it's really tough. And when you think about a business structurally, a dental practice can't take a 50% cut on its top line, or you can't support the cost structure, and you're in trouble, and you only have so much working capital, right? So you got to really figure it out. And the reason that happened, there's a bunch. But number one, don't buy a practice in which the seller has a practice 10 minutes away and is keeping that practice. That's rule number one. Don't do that, where the seller is not retiring, he's not partnering with you, he's just leaving to go to his other practice 10 minutes away. So that should instantly get off your skepticism radar of, all right, like what's actually going on here. Number two is really understand where the revenue is coming from. Know what the payer mix is, know what the revenue split is, and know how the practice's collections are coming in through procedure mix and through which providers are bringing in it, and be able to cut it every single which way. Because the big mistake that I made is a large chunk, 40% of this practice's revenue, maybe half, was coming in through third-party financing. And when money comes in through third-party financing, that's great, that works, but it's not coming in through the payers necessarily, and it's definitely not coming in through typical cash payments. So you kind of have to really understand where that's coming in from, and that's something that I really missed and underappreciated, because a lot of that was coming in through bigger treatments that our providers necessarily weren't going to treatment plan the way they did, and they weren't necessarily going to sell or recommend through the kind of the max out package that was getting recommended. And when that happens, you can't aim to, or you can't predict that you're going to be able to replicate that in the future. And so that was another big source of revenue loss. A lot of those big cases went away. For some reasons, you can consider ethical, some reasons you can consider style, whatever you want to call it, but that revenue went away. And number 3 is understand how the billing of the practice works. So a big mistake that I made was not fully appreciate how claims were being sent out, and again, not just the payer mix of the practice in terms of individual payers, but the different insurance reimbursement models that the practice was accepting. So this was a managed care practice. About a fourth of the revenue was coming in through managed care. And in the managed care game, revenues in dental are completely misaligned. As a dentist, you're actually financially incentivized not to see a patient for their recall. It's really screwed up. And when you accept that and you are a good dentist and you want to maximize utilization, you're inherently playing a game where utilization maximization leads to profit minimization, because a managed care patient will come into the office for free because they're on a capitation payment plan.
Right.
And you'll spend, $50 on that appointment in labor and payroll, et cetera. And you do that as a high volume of your hygiene, and that's also going to be potentially a leak on your bottom line. And so the game that this practice was previously playing was a utilization minimization game. And I'm playing a utilization maximization game.
That's so upside down. That is so weird. I mean, what you're saying makes absolute sense, but that is just so crazy.
Right. And so when that happens, you're in dental school, and then you get a big fat dose of the railroad, and you're like, I totally missed how insurances can work. So that was another big one. Patient lists. Again, back to point number 1. Don't buy a practice of a dentist who's just moving 10 miles away. Patient lists. We learned that a lot of the patients had kind of been shuffled over to a practice. That's obviously not a good thing. And I don't know how much I can share, because ultimately this did lead to a little bit of a problem, as you can imagine. Came out fine at the end, but it really led to a sink or swim situation in which we had to turn the business around. So what did I do? I rebranded the business. The business had a horrible reputation in the community, which is something else you should watch out for. And 5-6 years ago, it kind of sounds obvious now. There's so much education out there. There's resources like you guys, and knowledge is really plentiful, and information is boundless. But 5-6 years ago, that wasn't the case. So when you think about like community reputation, things like that, Facebook pages, blah, 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 those things didn't exist.
Yeah.
Crazy. The world's moving so fast, and those things you take for granted today didn't exist.
You're absolutely
so
right.
Now where it's really easy to gauge, reviews and what have you, back then it wasn't. So community reputation was terrible. I rebranded the whole thing. Swapped out the inside furniture, et cetera. Really gave the practice a facelift, gave the current patients that were still loyally attending the practice and being, patients of the practice, getting their clinical care done there, regardless of the, what any of the previous procedures and operations were. They came in, they saw a facelift, and we slowly started to rebound the practice, brought in some great providers. One of the great things about a dental practice is, even if that happens, there's a good shot you can get out of it just because of the nature of the business. And not having a bank loan certainly helps. So that was a really lucky thing. Man, if I had a lender, that would have been really tough. And so that's certainly helpful, and I'm aware of that. But we turned it around. So we got the collections from 120 to 160. We broke 200, in month 10 or 12. Then we broke 240. We broke 300. We ended up breaking 400 a month. So practice took off, and we started to build. I added a Denovo after that. Bought another practice after that, and another Denovo after that. And once you kind of have that first journey, that's how poorly it goes. You kind of feel like you're very confident, and you feel like you can kind of take on whatever gets tossed at you.
Wow, man. that is a whirlwind of information. So one thing I was going to interject with is, and you alluded to it, in the absence of a bank loan, that did definitely insulate you from a lot of the risk that was occurring there, right? Because you bought into, I think you said it was a $2 million practice, and
Yeah.
you're immediately having months where your revenue is being cut in half. And this is one thing that we kind of caution people about is, you can buy whatever the largest practice you can finance is, and that's awesome, right? Because even with smaller margins, you can still have wonderful cash flow if that is being reproduced, right? Whereas if you come in there and you don't exactly understand what the procedure mix is, and a lot of things change, and you're sort of changing the formula, you have a practice that was maxed out doing what it was doing, and then you come in there with what you're doing, and all of a sudden you're left holding the bag. And yeah, I mean, it is definitely fortunate that you were in that sort of unique situation, with your family, but at the same time, what an incredible journey that is, and how deep you were in trouble right there in the beginning, and to be able to pivot and work with that and come out of it, very successfully is super, super impressive. So I really got to applaud you on that. Peyton, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's honestly just such an incredible story. And I'm actually kind of curious. I know you said you did a couple Denovos and you did a couple acquisitions. Just as far as the process for those, I guess, which one do you enjoy more, or which one do you see yourself doing more of in the future?
Oh man, that's a packed question, a really good question. And one thing I'll add to Tyler's point first is bank loan, certainly different than a family loan, but there's a lot of pressure on a family loan too, because at the end of the day, that's not somebody else's money. That's your money, right? It's just
you're absolutely right. Didn't mean to take away from that.
No. I agree with you. Yeah. Bank loan would have been, that their clock's ticking, and I mentioned that. But it's important with a family loan. Family loan's quasi equity, right? That's skin in the game. If you default, and you're a dental student with a bank loan, what are they going to take? So just keeping that in mind. And then,
of course,
Payne, to your question, Denovo versus acquisition, it is a completely different game, man. They are two different. They're two different businesses. They're two different business models. They're two different businesses. They're both dental practices, but you have to think about them completely differently. And which one do I enjoy more? I don't think I have an answer to that. I actually enjoy both of them, and I think both models are terrific and have a great place in whether it's your business strategy or maybe just where your passion lies. But for an acquisition, you're taking on a cash flowing business, right? You're taking on something that has high predictability, that you can value, that you can take on a team. You're not building it brick by brick necessarily. You're adding incremental improvements to the margin. You're adding, your taste and flair to the business, and maybe there's a transition involved, there's a handoff, and that's great, and perfect. With a Denovo, you get the opportunity to really build your own baby, right? You can design it. You can think about the location. You can think about which payers you really want to accept. You can think about how you want to model your practice and who you are as a person, having that reflect, etc. You also are coming in with zero cash flow, zero revenue. So you start a project, let's say it's $500,000. You have to have a marketing strategy in place, which you necessarily don't have to on the acquisition. I'm sure the business is cash flowing. You can certainly, again, add to that margin, add incremental improvements, market, and new patients. But with a Denovo, marketing's the game. Marketing is either you win or you lose, really. Patients have to come and you have to deliver a great experience, leave a great review. That's all the marketing cycle, positive feedback loops. So I really think you have to be really, really well versed in the marketing game. I think you have to really understand how to build a brand, how to build yourself up, and you can do really, really well. But they're both so different. And one I really evaluate from like my finance hat. The other one I really evaluate from my marketing creativity hat more so.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put that. With acquisition, it's it's what's there, it's what numbers the practice is doing right now, how well you think you can uphold that. Whereas you're exactly right. With a startup, it's marketing is honestly, it's the lifeblood of the practice. You only have a certain amount of months you can float a startup before you really start to bring in a lot of money and start bringing in cash flow and be able to pay back that loan. So yeah, I think that's a fantastic way to frame that. Also, I know, like Tyler was saying, you've done a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. Is there any way you could give us a little bit more of a timeline as far as where all that stuff has fit in? I know you said you bought your first practice during D1.
Yeah.
But
Totally.
I'd like to hear kind of when that started turning around for you, and then when you started moving to your next opportunities.
Yeah, totally. So September 2015, that's when I bought my first practice. Basically, that deal closed. We did the due diligence or lack thereof, like I explained over the summer. We closed in September. I'm starting my first year again, my second year, classes, pre-clinic, whatever. And it was quite the fall and winter. Rode that business 2015. 2016 was really the key turnaround year. The rest of 2015 was a disaster from September to winter break D2 year. Ended up turning around the business, and in August 2017 launched the first Denovo. And so that was going into D3 year, right? And got my feet wet into the Denovo game, and quickly realized a lot of things we just talked about, how it's a completely different game. And you have to learn the rules of that game, and you have to be able to be nimble and hire a team from scratch and start marketing campaigns from scratch, which I actually already had to do because we rebranded the whole acquisition. That was basically a startup, even though it was an acquisition. And I was able to take that playbook into the Denovo. But still, you're hiring a new doctor, a new team. You're figuring out how to ramp up the capacity of a business, the utilization of a business. How to ramp up, variable costs at the business, and it's something that took about a year to really start to learn and start to do at a high level, where we're reliably, repeatedly over $1 million collecting business, which is what kind of I think is like a threshold for a good productive dental business. And started doing that. 2018 was a great year. Both businesses did really well. The first business is almost doubled at that point. The Denovo's 1.5, 1.7 something in collections, doing well. And then what did I do after that? Acquisition. So bought a practice, and that was a whole experience in itself. Fee-for-service practice. Man, do I love fee-for-service practices. The hype is real, and which I'll get to in a second. Okay. But fee-for-service practice, really profitable practice. Completely different business model in a fee-for-service practice. When you're not playing the insurance game in an increasingly insurance world, you got to be different and you got to be good. And so learned a ton in that experience.
This is in 2018.
This is in 2018, okay. And then kept going from there. And Denovo in 2019, and then I really started to ramp up, kind of how I looked at things, because during that time I was at Wharton, I was at business school. So I was basically seeing from 2018 to 2020 a world in an increasingly, I would say, binary fashion in which I can really see the world of finance and entrepreneurship. And I can also see the dental world and my experience thus far and kind of merge those two things. And that helped me out a ton. I learned, finance like a whiz relative to what I came in 2015. I can model, I could do, things that, a Goldman Sachs analyst, year two can do. And I think those things obviously help a lot. And those things give you a real competitive advantage, especially when I learned the hard way, when you don't really have that toolkit, that knowledge, you can really screw up the deal. Again, like my first deal, everybody knows about it.
Dude, yeah, that's such an incredible timeline, honestly. Starting in dental school and just keeping it going. Also, I will say it really does sound like you like to make things hard on yourself. I feel like you went through like every type of practice model you could in a series of like 3 or 4 years, which is impressive. Never stop learning, right?
Yeah, and I think it just kind of goes with my evolution as how I think about the business of dentistry. Love the acquisition opportunity. This is probably some of my bias too, kicking in, if I'm being honest with you, Peyton. Like, got burned on an acquisition, right? I'm like, screw this. I'm going to start my own thing, do it the right way.
Right.
Then I realized the Denovo game and what's tough about that. And I'm like, wow, I see a monster acquisition fee for service practice, right? And that's going to be, I don't have to deal with those insurances and all that stuff. And I know what I'm getting. I know the AR is like nothing because you're either getting paid through credit or cash. And it's much more straightforward.
Right.
And then that was great. But then I'm like, hey, well, you know what? This first, Denovo is going really well. So I might as well just start another. Because now I've kind of figured it out. So it's kind of my bias also in the journey. And I think it's my bias from the previous hardship, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of want to get a little bit more introspective about, really from the beginning when you were first getting into ownership, because a lot of the people that are listening to the show don't yet own a practice, right? At least this particular segment. So you're a D1, you just purchased this absolutely massive practice. What was your life like at this time? How were you, splitting that? What was your team like? I mean, you mentioned that there was a partner at one point, and I know you obviously had to bring in some providers once the practice was bought. Who all was kind of involved in this, and what was your day-to-day like?
Yeah, totally. So I'll start with the dental school side.
Okay.
I was pretty absent from school. It's going to sound really, really bad, but I didn't really go to any social events. I didn't do much at school besides the bare minimum, clinically and going to, passing tests and all that stuff.
There's not too many professors and admins listening to this show, so don't worry too much.
Yeah, I have no idea. But I mean, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of immune anyway, so.
But yeah, man, I wasn't. I mean, like a lot of faculty probably hated my guts, and that's just kind of the nature of it. But so that was the D1, or sorry, that was the dental school side. So really just doing what I had to. But then also, I did take interest in a lot of things, and I've got a lot of like really, really amazing faculty that I went the extra mile with. That was really, really important. And I think, as a general rule of thumb, find a few faculty, find a few rocks at the school that, you can really relate to and you get and they get you, and go far with those people, because it's, it's a school, I get it, but really, you're looking for those one-on-one mentorships. And one-on-one relationships. I think that's the most important thing. On the business side, yeah. So my father and my uncle supported me. I owe those guys a ton, not just financially, but also through business know-how, operational know-how. A little bit more old school thought, but I think you needed that when you're first coming in, and you have to operate a business. Clinical partner, fantastic guy. He was at the business. He was doing everything at the office, from seeing patients to really, turning around that patient experience and from what it was, and to, especially as we try to get new patients, ramp the practice back up, and repair the reputation of the practice. Then we started hiring practitioners. So we hired a general dentist. There was already an existing general dentist at the practice, so that's 3 GDs at the practice. We went from 2 hygienists to 4 hygienists. We had an orthodontist like a couple days a week. We effectively made that orthodontist almost full-time, added oral surgery to that practice. There's 2 suites built out for sedation. Periodontist coming, multiple times a week to the practice. And that's, how we took the revenue up. We started adding multiple procedure mixes, specialty mixes, in-house referrals, combined with the branding and all that, combined with the superior patient experience, everything kind of starting to fire at once, to make it a profitable, a bigger practice, a better business.
So I think you mentioned before when you bought it, did you say 20 ops?
Yeah, there's actually more than that. It's like 25 ops. Yeah.
So there were 2 hygienists in this 25 op practice.
Yeah. So again, the practice was depleted. So, if you can imagine, there's 2 hygienists going full time. There's 1.5 dentists at that point. Again, I can't stress enough. When you think about it this way, Tyler, month 1, we did 120K in revenue, right? 120K revenue, that's more like a 7 op practice, right? That's more like you could do that in 8 ops, whatever.
Right.
And how many hygienists are in that practice? 2.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what I took on.
That's
but
what you
it had
bought.
the capacity.
Yeah.
So I
Not what you
bought.
paid for, it's what you bought.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it had the capacity to do a lot more. And so we started filling those chairs and we started ramping.
I understand. Yeah. Wow. That is brilliant. So so you kind of mentioned, go ahead, Peyton. Sorry.
I was gonna say, I can't imagine like an office doing that little and having that much space. Like that is an incredible opportunity, which I know a little bit of a bumpy road along the way, but that's an awesome find.
So the practice, started like 2 decades ago, and it had its heydays. But here's another point I could have added. The practice was in a decline when we took it over, but it wasn't like a steep decline. It was just a steady decline. And then the decline really hit when, patients started getting shuffled and things like that. but, so we should have saw the writing on the wall maybe a year or two before. But again, I'm so happy it happened because it gave us this awesome, space to grow in and learn in and capacity to expand same store versus, having to go outside your box.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you definitely bought something with like very large bones, and you talked about, kind of getting into that sort of sink or swim situation. You had to rebrand, you had to bring in all these different providers and specialists. Can you talk a little bit about what that rebrand was like and how you managed to get these new patients after they were essentially just leaving to go with the dentist that was now 10 minutes away?
Sure. Yeah. So this is like really where I went into overdrive. I think my biggest value add was this.
Okay.
And we went from 70 new patients to 220 new patients a month. And the way we kind of did it was, I'm a young guy. Again, first year, second year in dental school.
Pretty young.
And I'm not saying, I'm saying relative to, the older guys in the field.
Of course.
Yes. But again, thinking about just where the status of the internet was 5-6 years ago, Facebook advertising was like just starting, man.
Okay.
Like it was in its nascent days. It was like the wild, wild west. I would post before and afters, things that are banned, of like, restorations and veneers, like real work and beautiful work, things that Facebook would ban today. And man, these things would go viral in the community. So I was just finding mixes and matches on social media of just how to crush the strategy, stuff that no other dentist literally in the country was doing, because it was literally like day one of social media advertising. And it's not what it is today where, it's just information overload.
Right.
But back then, man, it was a really cool medium to market a dental practice on, because most of the brands on social media at the time, the supplement companies, there are people and groups that need online marketing to really thrive and gain distribution. They're not your local business. And so, there's a big opportunity there. So that's number one, rebranding the business and really using social media and building an online portfolio to really, heal the reputation of the practice. I get comments on the social media all the time, like, oh no, this is that office. Like, you don't want to go here. And man, I'd just be like on my thumbs all freaking day. I'd be in dental school and lecture, just responding to these people. Like no, new ownership, new this, new that, just trying to translate that they got to come back and they'll have a much better experience. So a lot of that, but, played with, paper mail, played with Google, did all this stuff that, a typical practice does. But the really big hack that I had coming in and basically my competitive advantage and my edge was social media and the ability to use that to an advantage at a time when no other dentist or small business likely was.
Right. Okay. Yeah, no, that's definitely an auspicious time to be coming in. And I mean, obviously, like, you had the perspicacity to say, oh, okay, there's something to this before a lot of other people were. And it's so funny to talk about, 2015 as if it were like some bygone era, but in terms of like dental marketing, it is. And you were able to. It makes
you realize how fast the world's compounding.
It's insane.
Sorry to cut you off, but
no, you're right.
Yeah, like nobody zooms out like 5 years ago, half a decade ago. We're talking about blockchains and cryptos and NFTs, and there is, just 5 years ago is, Facebook was nascent.
Yeah. Those aren't even words 5 years ago, basically.
Yeah. Where was GME 5 years ago?
Yeah, right. We're not going to the moon 5 years ago. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Yeah. That is just so awesome that you were able to identify that low hanging fruit. I mean, can you imagine if you were sort of in that situation today with the way dental marketing is and how everyone's already on social media and they're on TikTok, they're on Instagram, they're on everything. Do you think you still would have been able to pivot and rebrand, in a similar fashion? Would there be enough low hanging fruit there for you?
Oh man, it's so hard to overlay timeframes because it's such a different game.
Hmm.
But trying to put myself, if I bought a practice and the revenue went in half and I didn't
Yeah.
learn from my mistakes and I'm an idiot. I'm really trying to think hard about it, like what I would do. I
Yeah.
mean, you got to ramp up the marketing engine. You have to.
Yeah.
You're probably going to have to, depending on who the provider. Well, you have to obviously know what the reason is that the practice
Right.
isn't performing well.
Right.
But I would make a change day one and just figure that out. And whether it's the staff, whether it's the marketing, whether it's just someone stealing money. I don't money out of the business. I have no idea. But you just got to act and have a propensity for action and just figure it out. But I don't think that if you listen to this podcast and you do any of those first few points that I say not to do, that's on you. Don't do it.